מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לא אחסר. בנוטש ירביצני ימי מנוחות ינחלני. נפשי שובב. ינחני ומגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי הלך בגיא צלמוות, לא ירעי כי אתה עמדי. שבטך משענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי כסירים ויד. אך טוב וחסד ירדיפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. I've chanted for you the words of our 23rd Psalm. In moments when our hearts are breaking, when we are searching for comfort and some source of strength, we often turn to the psalmist. And so I invite you at this time to recite these words with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember her. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember her. In the opening of buds, in the rebirth of spring, we will remember her. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember her. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember her. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember her. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember her. And when we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember her. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember her. So long as we live, she too will live, for she is now a part of us as we remember Joan Katz. To her husband Alan, her daughter Jan, and son-in-law Steve, to her brother Michael and sister-in-law Joyce, and also to her brother, not by blood, but a true member of the family, to Kenny, to her grandchildren, Matthew and Jessica, Ryan and Kara, and Michael, to her niece and nephew, Megan and Brian, and today, with loving hearts, we join together as we remember her niece, Shani, of blessed memory. To all the members of the family, and to so many dear friends, we've come together today to remember, but also to celebrate the life of your beloved Joni. From the writings of Ecclesiastes, we learn the lesson that for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And now is a time to speak. Words, stories, and memories of a beautiful life and a beautiful human. Joan's journey began here in Cleveland. She was born in 1936 to Sidney and Shirley Moschance. And by the time her baby brother Michael entered into the picture, the family was living in Cleveland Heights at the corner of Bainbridge and Maple. Michael, your sister was 7 years your senior. In your earliest years, you remember a sister who enjoyed a happy childhood, a sister who, you said, could be a bit mischievous, a sister who, when you were just 7 or 8 years old, and your sister must have been 14 or 15 years old, would steal the family car, but not before putting you in the back seat of that car, and go off on a joyride. Mind you, no car seats, no seat belts. Michael, it's a small miracle you're still here. It seems from a very early age your sister had a passion for cars and for driving. You remember your cousin Sandy Atkin of blessed memory calling your teenage sis, offering to give her driving lessons, and so she threw you in the car and drove over to Sandy's home for driving lessons. You also recall the dozens and dozens of times that Joan would take you with her for a ride. She would drive over to the dog pound in Cleveland, located on Wiley Avenue. Michael, you remember how Joan would always find, as you described to me, the dirtiest, scrappiest, most forlorn-looking dog, and she'd bring him or her home, clean him up, feed the dog, get it healthy, and then, of course, give the dog away to a good home. And what would she do after that? She'd go back and do it all over again. This little story, Michael, that you shared, it speaks volumes about your sister, about the size of her heart, and about the life that she led. Joan was kind-hearted, generous, and as you said, Michael, a staunch friend. You knew your sister to be generous, maybe even to a fault. You told me that while she never had a lot of money, if a family member or a friend needed anything, she was there to give you what she had. Michael, back in the day when you and your buddy Kenny bought a Harley together, it was Joan who gave you the loan. Kenny assures me that he paid her back. Michael, you said she was a loyal and loving sister and friend. And I just want to remind you that death cannot sever the bond that the two of you shared for so many years. Following high school, Jan met and then married Larry Riga. And while this marriage did end in divorce, it brought forth a wonderful, warm, and loving person, their daughter Jan. Jan, your mom was something else, truly one of a kind. You saw her as a hard-working single mom. She was a secretary at the Blonder Company and also at the North American Lumber Company, but wherever she worked, she did whatever it took. You had quite a childhood. So many interesting experiences and fun times. The multi-generational home on Faversham in University Heights, the home that you lived in following the passing of your mom's father, your grandfather Sidney. The home where it sounds like everyone lived, whether for a short period or a long time. Your grandmother Shirley lived there, your father Larry, your Uncle Michael, and Kenny, and so many of Uncle Michael's friends. It was a warm and fun home that seemed to have a revolving door at the front entrance, a place that was open to all. That's because your mom made it that way. How much fun, Jan, you must have had growing up with all the dogs and the parrots and the bunnies and even a cat that your mom was allergic to. Jan, you have these sweet memories of trips with your mom when you were a little girl, jumping into her little blue MG on a moment's notice and just deciding to drive to Toronto with her blonde hair blowing in the breeze. Or the visits that you and your mom would take down to Florida to visit your grandmother. This is where your mom loved to worship the sun and loved to spend time at the flea markets. Your mom, as you said, and I'm quoting you, Jan, you said she was not June Cleaver, but you said she was this unconventional, amazing mother who loved her family above all. And Jan, your mom certainly taught you by example. You saw a woman who did everything she could to provide for you. She was so proud of you and of the woman that you've become. She was proud of the choices that you've made, including the choice to marry Steve, and how you and Steve have guided your mom's three favorite people in the world. Your sons, Matthew and Ryan and Michael. And how proud was your mom every time you would prepare and cook those beautiful holiday dinners. You said that you thought that she was the most beautiful person inside and out. And Jan, you also said that the two of you, while different in many ways, you were a beautiful balance. You balanced each other out. And while you know that you and your mom did have these differences, she was always for you the center of your universe. You not only loved her, but you said, I adored her. And with only 21 years between the two of you, as you began to grow up and move into adulthood, this was not just a mom, but this was your best friend. While Joan was working at North American Lumber, she met Joan Katz. Alan, you diligently pursued this beautiful and intelligent woman. It took several months, but finally Joan agreed to go out with you. A courtship ensued, love blossomed, and Alan and Joan married at Brith Emeth on March 4th, 1967, with Rabbi Philip Horowitz officiating. And as Alan stood beneath the chuppah next to Joan, a 9-year-old Jan held Alan's hand throughout the ceremony. Alan, together you and Joan traveled the road of life. 52 years as husband and wife. 52 years of love and of wonderful times with so many trusted and excellent friends. 52 years of family and holidays and celebrations and travel. Joan was quite the go-getter, and she lovingly schlepped Alan along to England not once but several times. While Joan was more of the talker, the kibitzer, Alan, you were the quieter one. The two of you together shared so many laughs, and you were always willing to go along with her ideas and whims. There was balance. Alan, Joan had her big and bright personality, and she brought excitement to your world. And Alan, you brought a beautiful calmness and a source of serenity to hers. Alan and Joan's hearts as a couple were open to everyone. Jan, you told me that for their friends, that your parents had this wide-ranging, diverse group of friends. All ages, all backgrounds. And this is going back to a time before our society was open to accepting everyone. But Alan and Joan were loving and accepting to all their friends. Older, younger, gay, straight. As a couple, they were open and never judgmental. Alan, besides your combined love of family and dear friends, you and Joan had a common interest when it came to the four-legged members of society. You absolutely bonded over the dogs. You would travel together to the Westminster dog shows, something you both loved doing. And Alan, when you saw Joan soar while working for the Pedigree Dog Food Company for over 30 years, when you saw her dedication to the company that she and Kenny created together, Sundown Dobermans, and Alan, when you watched your beloved excel career-wise in what she was truly meant to do, you could not have been more proud of her. Your wife had grown to be highly respected, not just in Northeast Ohio, but nationally. This successful woman, your Joni, she knew that her biggest cheerleader was always you, Alan. While I've tried to describe the team of Alan and Joan, I must share something about another team. This was the team of Alan, Joan, and Kenny. Whether it was the three of you or Kenny, just you and Joan, your lives were so deeply intertwined. You and Joan worked together for so many years, developing not just a business, but cultivating the most special of friendships. When you and Alan and Joan were at dog shows, or more likely dog obedience classes, you and Joan might begin to banter or bicker or sometimes argue. And the instructor would usually come over to Joan and gesture towards you, Kenny, and say something about your husband, and he'd be pointing to you. And this would end in uncontrolled laughter, as Joan would have to always inform the instructor that you were not the husband. And together you rescued greyhounds and bred Dobermans and Afghans and Shih Tzus. The two of you traveled around in the country in that motorhome, the one with all the stories that I'm not allowed to know about. But much more than that, more important than the business you built together, is the trust and the friendship that grew over the many years. And towards the end, Kenny, when she needed you the most, you were there, rising above and putting her needs above all else. Steve, she never viewed you as a son-in-law, but as her son, and you called her Mom. Your relationship was real and very close and honest. She would often ask your advice on business issues, and sometimes she might even take your advice. She loved watching you carve the Thanksgiving turkey each year. She loved watching you develop into the father you've become, and she loved to see how happy you've made Jan. Now, if you asked Joni about her grandchildren, she could instantly produce a wallet filled with dozens of photographs of her handsome grandsons. And boys, your Joni, as you called her, she was always that cool, independent, strong-willed grandmother. Gentlemen, I know that she adored you and loved you with all her heart and was completely devoted to the three of you, as well as her granddaughters, Jessica and Kara. Joan Katz was honored as she was named a member of the Doberman Top 20 Committee. She, I'm told, had a sixth sense when it came to dogs, and she was the key to successfully matching so many friends and family members with their pets. She knew dogs, and when it came to that, she had the best advice. In mentioning Joan and her friends, there were, of course, the longtime friends for so many decades, but there were also the newer friends, the friends she made at the Peter B. Lewis Aquatic Center some 15 years ago. All of her special friends, all of you meant so much to her. Not too long ago, this past Yom Kippur, Joan was at the Landerbrook Rehab Center. Somehow, with great assistance, but somehow she was able to muster the strength to join her family for the breakfast meal held at Joyce and Michael's place. Sitting next to her daughter, Joan just looked around the table, and she said to you, Jan, "We have such a nice family." Joan knew and appreciated her many blessings, just as she was a blessing to so many. We join with the sages of our people in thinking about Joan. As we declare Zichrona Livracha, we pray that the memory of Joan and all the good deeds that she performed here in the land of the living, we pray that these memories will always be our blessing. Amen. We've been taught that words which come from the heart enter directly to the heart. At this time, I want to call on her three grandsons, Matthew, Ryan, and Michael. They have words and memories from their heart they want to share with all of us.
Good morning, everyone. I want to start off by thanking everyone who's here this morning. It's so nice to see a room filled with so many people who knew my grandma. I have to say, though, from here on out, it's Joni, not Grandma. As many of you may know, she was always Joni to us. That being said, I'd like to share a few thoughts and stories about Joni, as she was an incredibly important person in my life. As the first grandchild in the family, I've always been told how ecstatic Joni was when she heard I was born, and it was a special day for her. I believe her first words when she saw me were, "He's just marvelous." Joni was only 48 years old when I was born. And I know she loved it when we were out together because people would ask if I was her baby. My blonde hair at the time and blue eyes matched hers, and I think it drove my mom a little crazy. Growing up, I spent a ton of time with Joni. Some of my earliest memories as a child are at her house, and of course, all the dogs. And I'm not talking about a couple dogs, I'm talking about at least 7 or 8 Dobermans at any given time amongst other animals. I loved going over there to visit and hang with Joni, Pop, Kenny, and all the pups. Joni was certainly in the dog scene and even tried recruiting me at a young age to be a junior dog handler. One of her favorite pictures was of me and her dog Max at a dog show in Solon, and it was unfortunately only a picture memory for her because she was off at another dog show the day of my big debut. I won 2 trophies that day, and I know that it made her proud, even though one of the awards was for longest tail. I also have very fond memories of driving with Joni. One time, their landscapers left their gate open at their house, and most of the dogs got out. Joni and I jumped into her little 2-seater car, and we went up and down their street, putting the dogs back in the car. It was just crazy with her hollering all the dogs' names and the dogs just everywhere in the car. We recovered all the dogs, and everyone was safe, but it was quite the adventure. Every time we went out together in that car, Joni would let me do all the gear shifting. She'd tell me to listen to the engine, and when it sounds really high, that's when we'd shift. We were quite the duo, to say the least. And while I officially learned how to drive at 15 and a half, I got my unofficial start with Joni. I got antsy around 14 years old and always wanted to drive a car. I knew that wasn't going to fly with my parents, so I turned to Joni. I'd have my parents drop me off to hang at their house, and then would beg Joni to let me drive myself home. Believe it or not, Joni would jump in the passenger seat, and she let me drive the 3 miles back to my parents' house. Joni was always the coolest in my house. I feel so fortunate that my wife Jessica and Joni were able to form such a tight bond over the past 12 years. They talked many times a week and chatted about all sorts of things. They discussed the latest happenings on who knows what Bravo and MTV shows, shared beauty tips and tricks, talked about shoes, of course. They seemed to sometimes have their own language, and whatever they'd be talking about would be way over my head, yet they'd be hysterical about it. Even though I have two brothers who are in the IT world, Joni would always call Jess to troubleshoot whatever iPad or iPhone prompt that she had. They hit it off together. I'm so happy for the relationship that they shared. I could go on and on with stories about Joni, and all of these memories remind me how lucky we are to have had such a special person in our lives. While I'm sad she isn't here with us today, I'm happy I'll have a life filled with so many wonderful memories. Thank you.
On my mom's side growing up, I didn't have a grandmother. I had Joni. Grandmothers typically don't let you drive cars at 14, or ride three-wheel gas scooters in the street unsupervised, or let you and your friend wander off and get lost, but Joni did. Grandmothers generally talk about their grandchildren growing up and how every second of watching them grow up is magical. As recent as a month ago, Joni recalled the story where I was 2 years old and we were traveling to Florida. Our plane was delayed, and I was being obnoxious and mischievous as I always was, and I was laying out on the moving walkway, just kind of floating right down the terminal. Joni distinctly said, at that point, I just wanted to let you go. That was Joni. She said whatever she was in her heart, whether it was politically correct or not. I could only describe Joni's house growing up in one word, and that word would be chaos. I can remember a time when she had as many as 6 or 7 dogs, and maybe even 3 or 4 birds. I'd walk in the house and immediately just mobbed by the dogs. And then as I moved inside, I could hear the parrots upstairs, and they would often recite the words they commonly heard said in the house. Typically those words were the 4-letter words I was always taught not to say. So sorry, Mom, I learned those at Joni's house. Despite her non-traditional approach, she was so utterly devoted to all of us. Joni walked around literally accosting people with an accordion-style sleeve of pictures, probably go all the way to the ground from up here. And she would just brag about how great all of us were. And truthfully, it would get to the point where it'd actually be borderline uncomfortable because, I mean, we were good, but we weren't that good. Joni's passion for dogs led me to find 2 of my own that my wife Kara and I love unconditionally. When Kara and I would go out of town, she loved having the dogs over to her house where she would spoil them rotten and Kenny would feed them food from the table, so any attempt at training our dogs would typically be undone at a weekend at Joni's. But to be able to go out of town and know they were in the best possible hands was always something that was so important to Kara and I, and it was something that was very special. Kara loved Joni as if she was her own grandmother, which was always so special to me. On any given day, Kara might send Joni as many as 15 pictures of our dogs, and Joni absolutely loved it. Kara would even call or visit Joni when I wasn't around, and in her wedding ring she has diamonds that Joni insisted that she have, and it really means so much to me that Kara carries a constant reminder of Joni with her every single day. It's hard to imagine what it'll be like without her moving forward. I don't know who will text me at 5:45 on a random weekday morning informing me that there might be ice on the road. While I will miss her dearly, I find comfort in the fact that we had an incredible and unique bond, and I always knew exactly where I stood with her. I like to think she's now with all of her beloved animals that she lost over the years, and my great-grandmother Shirley, who I adored as well. I love you, Joni, and I will miss you so much, but I promise to continue to make you proud every day.
I'm sure we could talk about Joni for hours and talk about endless stories and all that, but I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that were important to me and our relationship. When I was younger, probably 2, 3, or 4 years old, we'd go to their house and Ryan said, instantly be mobbed by a pack of Dobermans, all dogs that are much bigger than I was, and I would cry and cry for help, anything to get out of that mob. And I remember talking with Graham some time back about how she was so worried whether or not I would like dogs and how big of a problem that would be for her, being my grandmother. But out of that fear of walking in the door and being mobbed came my love for animals, and I always thank Joni for that, because she really taught me how to love something like that. And whether it was anything as small as her getting a new dog and having us come up with names, or even just letting us handle them, she really showed me my passion and my love for animals, and I can never thank her for that. I wish that was something I told her, but I know that she knows that she's probably responsible for that, and I think she's just satisfied with that. And over the last couple of weeks, we've had obviously a lot of family time and close time, and with that comes a lot of time of reflection. And hearing all these stories just from Uncle Michael, or even my mom, or Kenny, or Alan, just talking about how she was back in the day, it's I only knew her as however old she was, so I see a lot of those stories come out, and I see a lot of some of the stories you heard, it's kind of like, well, I guess things haven't really changed, but that's the beauty of it. And I always she would say how proud of us she was, and for a while it took me a long time to figure out some grandparent's grandkid is a brain surgeon, or a doctor or something, so I understand you're proud of somebody for doing medicine and learning all these things, but it took me a very long time, up until at least like the last month or so, to figure out that she was just proud of us for being us, and I think she was proud of the way that she helped raise us, and that's always meant so much to me, is finally figuring out why she was so proud of us, and she was just happy with the men that we became, and she'll be in our hearts forever because of that. She's helped shape me and my brothers and my family along, just ever so carefully. And this is just a personal story. When I was in Israel a few years ago, much like how Ryan would get a text at 5 in the morning about ice on the road, she would be texting me in Israel at what for me would be 10 a.m., but over here it's like 3 or 4 in the morning, and she was just always up, and she was just always asking how I was doing. I didn't even know she knew how to use the phone that well, but here she is checking in on me at 11 in the morning my time, and it makes me smile, and it makes me happy, because thousands of miles away, she's still thinking of me at the earliest times of the morning, and she always had us in our thoughts, and that's what means the most to me. And I know she'll be smiling down, looking at us with every decision we make, whether it's right or wrong, because she oftentimes would make the wrong decision with things, but to her it was right. So that's all I really have to say. We'll miss her very much. She was a huge stone in our life to keep us all grounded. We'll be thinking about her every day going forward.
When I come to the end of the road and the sun has set for me, I want no rights in a gloom-filled room. Why cry for a soul set free? Miss me a little, but not too long, and not with your head bowed low. Remember the love that we once shared. Miss me, but let me go. For this is a journey we all must take, and each must go alone. It's all a part of the Master's plan, a step on the road to home. When you are lonely and sick at heart, go to the friends we knew, and bury your sorrows in doing good deeds. Miss me, but let me go. Before we conclude our service, I want to just share with everyone that anyone who might be wishing to make a contribution in memory of Joan, the family has suggested that you might consider an organization that is very dear to Joan, the Greyhound Adoption of Ohio. Also, the family will be receiving visitors today immediately following our service. They'll be at Point East in the community room until 5 p.m. The address is 27500 Cedar Road. There will also be visitation tomorrow evening from 6 until 8 p.m., and that will be at the home of Jan and Steve, located at 25 Deep Creek Lane in Moreland Hills. As you're able, I invite you to rise for the El Mole, the memorial prayer. El Mole Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amsei Menucha Nechana Tachat Kanfech HaShchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim, Kezochar Arakia Masyirim, Et Nishmat Yakirenu, Shahalacha Leolama Began Eden Techem Menuchata, Ana Baharachamim Astirecha, B'Seiter Knafach Leolamim, V'titror b'tzorachai yemet nishmata, Adonai hu nechalata, v'tanuach b'shalom, al mishkava v'nomar, Amen. O merciful God, who dwells on high, who is full of compassion, grant perfect peace beneath the shelter of your divine presence among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament. To our dear departed Joan Katz, who has gone to her eternal home. May Joan's soul be bound up in the bonds of eternal life, and grant that her memory inspire all of us to noble and consecrated living. And to this we say, Amen. At this time we turn to the words of our Kaddish, and those who wish to join us, I invite you to recite these words with us now. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach chirutei, v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon u'v'yomechon, u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'yimru, Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam ul'almei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, Shmei d'Kudashah, B'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechamata, Damiran v'alma v'yimru, Amen. Yehei shalom araba min shemaya, V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru, Amen. Osei shalom b'mromad, Huya asei shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru. Amen. We pray that God, who makes peace in a high place, will send peace and comfort to you, the mourners, to Israel, and to all humankind. Amen. On behalf of the family, we thank you for your love and support on this sad and important day. As you've come here in peace, we pray that you go forth in peace today.